I prayed to God to help me love my dad, but no matter how hard I tried, the heavy feeling in my heart would not just go away. I didn't know the cause of this hatred and bitterness towards my dad. I would often ask myself questions like, why are you angry with him? And my response would be, I don't know. What I know is that I can't help but just be angry with him. Because most of the time, nothing happened though, but the sight of him would just stir up this heavy feeling in my heart of hatred and bitterness towards him. Coming to God's Lighthouse and hearing pastor talk about how mothers tell their children stories about their father, which may not be entirely true because they won't tell their own part in the story, made me realize the source of my problem. Some years ago, I started hating my dad for no just reason. I didn't understand why I hated him. All I knew was that whenever I laid eyes on him or was in the same space with him, it felt like I was carrying a bag filled with bile in my heart. Now, if my dad had a favorite child, it would be me. But he didn't do favorite child stuff. But somehow it was obvious to everyone that my dad favored me more. So my siblings and even my mom were always surprised at the way I responded to everything my dad did. I would capitalize on anything I felt he did wrong and express my opinions strongly. Most of the time, my dad's actions were never directed at me, but mostly at my siblings. But I found a way to always make it my problem and express my thoughts strongly about it, even more than the parties involved, and often to their surprise. On very few occasions, I even went ahead to express my mind to my dad in a very disrespectful manner to everyone's surprise, including my dad. You could tell he's surprised by the shock on his face and the silence that followed. And even when he responded, he seemed short of words. No one else could do this and get away with it in my house. You will receive a good share of his wrath, both those involved and those not involved. But I don't know why my dad didn't respond as he would have done if it was my other siblings. On those few occasions, I felt guilty afterwards and I asked God to forgive me, but I never apologized to him. I didn't know the cause of this hatred and bitterness towards my dad. I would often ask myself questions like, why are you angry with him? And my response would be, I don't know. What I know is that I can't help but just be angry with him. Because most of the time, nothing happened though, but the sight of him would just stir up this heavy feeling in my heart of hatred and bitterness towards him. I prayed to God to help me love my dad, but no matter how hard I tried, the heavy feeling in my heart would not just go away. This didn't stop me from greeting my dad, interacting with him when necessary, and even running some errands for him, although reluctantly, because I would force myself to do all of this, and I don't know if he noticed my resentment towards him. Coming to God's Lighthouse and hearing pastor talk about how mothers tell their children stories about their father, which may not be entirely true because they won't tell their own part in the story, made me realize the source of my problem. My mom had the habit of doing this, and over the years, I ended up developing bitterness and hatred for my dad. Now, my mom, after telling me all those stories, will still relate very well with my dad, and I often wondered why she was not still angry with him, because I was still angry with him, while she that told me the story is no longer angry with him. I don't know what she expected me to do with the stories she always told me, or maybe she was just looking for someone to share her grievances with. And unknown to her, she was sowing seeds of bitterness and hatred in my heart. When I realized this, I had to tell her to stop. So one day, she came as usual to where I was sitting and sat close by and started to say things like, "This your daddy, eh? I don't even understand him." I don't know if I allowed her to finish her story before cutting her short and telling her that if she had any problem with my dad, she should go and tell him, I beg. I explained to her that telling me is not going to help the situation in any way, but if she told my dad, it could help. I went further to explain to her the effect of her stories on me and how that was the root of my hatred and bitterness for my dad, because by now it was obvious to my mom and siblings that I hated him. When I was done, she did not say anything again to me about my dad, and on another occasion, it felt like she wanted to share her grievances about my dad with me, but she ended up saying, "Shay, you said it's me that is making you hate your dad." Okay, oh. I knew she had more to say, but couldn't say it, and I was so grateful to God because I was not ready to hear again. I'm thanking God because by just listening to Pastor, I was able to fight properly and overcome bitterness of heart and hatred, even though I had prayed about it severally to no avail. I don't even know how it left or when, but I just know that I love and appreciate my dad now, and I'm able to see the sacrifices he has made for the well-being of my siblings and I. The feeling of bitterness and hatred is now a thing of the past, and I barely remember what it felt like, and I'm grateful to God for this. Amen.
Thanks for watching. For more stories of God's transforming power as well as all the life-changing content, do check out the links in the description. Please do not forget to subscribe, like, turn on your notification bell, and share. God bless you.